What if everything you knew about your country, your place, or even your people came from second-hand tales, adventure novels, or even old-school history books that wasn't really right in the first place? What if it wasn't just wrong, but also intentional? And what if you had no say in rectifying it? What would you do? Hello everyone, my name is Riya Gandhi and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to cover one of the most important parts of English literature, a part that you cannot afford to skip, especially if you are preparing for your UGC-NET English exam, and that is Edward Said's work, Orientalism. If you have ever been confused as to what Orientalism actually means, or you have struggled to understand what cultural imperialism is and how it connects with Orientalism, then today's video is your shortcut to clarity. No jargon, no fluff. We are going to simplify it for you in such a manner that it will stick with you till the end. Whether you are prepping up for your UGC-NET English exam or you're a literature student trying to understand how cultural representations create certain power dynamics. So, stick around till the end of this video and don't forget to make notes. So who exactly was Edward Said? Edward Said was a Palestinian-American literary scholar, critic, writer, and activist who basically pioneered the field of postcolonial studies. He's popularly known today for his groundbreaking work, which is Orientalism, published in 1978. In this particular book, he has talked about the two very important parts of the world, which is the West and the East. He was highly influenced by writers and thinkers like Antonio Gramsci, Franz Fanon, Michel Foucault, and he used their ideas in order to understand how the West viewed the East and created certain predominant cultural stereotypes about the East, also called as the Orient, that even continued down till today. So what exactly is the Orient? Let's break that down first. The word Orient has Latin origins in which it basically means rising or east. East pointing to the direction in which the sun rises. Now, over the period of time, this word started to gain layers and layers of cultural and ideological baggage. It started to mean the East with a capital E, signifying the countries in Asia, Middle East, and North Africa, in contrast to the Occident. The Occident geographically refers to the major part of the Western countries. So when we are talking about Orientalism as a field of study, it is not just the study of the East or the Orient. It is also the study of the Western gaze. How the West perceived the East. So when you look at the literature that was produced during the Elizabethan age and the other subsequent ages down to Victorian age, in terms of the travel books produced, adventure novels, or for that matter, personal diaries, you will realize that the East has always been represented as mysterious, as exotic, as savage or irrational, in stark contrast to rational, civilized, sophisticated, mannerly West. Now understand that this was the perception, the representation of the West. And this sort of also created, categorized the East as other. Was this representation true? Said argued that Orient is not a real place. It is actually a constructed image in the Western imagination. Why? Because that will then justify their control, their power, their domination, and even colonization. It's less about what the East is in reality and more about how the West wants to see it. Here's a quote from Orientalism that you should remember for UGC-NET. Edward Said said that knowledge of the Orient, because generated out of strength, in a sense creates Orient. What does that mean? Basically, whatever I have said up until now. It basically means that Orient is not a real place, is not a concrete thing. It is something that is created by the Western perception and Western imagination to justify their control and domination. So all of these works, be it travel writings, personal diaries, adventure novels that talk about the East in some or the other way, all of these works, they are subsumed under the category of Orientalist scholarship. Now, you must be wondering that didn't the East, the Orient, try to rectify their image, or didn't they have any problem with the kind of representation that was prevalent during that point of time? Well, remember, people often say that history is created by those who win, and so all of these works that are subsumed under the category of Orientalist scholarship portray and represent colonized as so incapable of thinking, acting, or even speaking for themselves, as a result of which they are incapable of writing their own national histories. And so, if the East or the colonized are rendered incapable of writing their own national histories, then the West is going to take matters in its own hands and write their national histories from their own perspective, creating certain cultural stereotypes and portraying the culture of the West as the standard where everybody should follow just that. This is what Said had argued in his work Orientalism. And that brings me to another significant concept introduced by Edward Said, and that is cultural imperialism, something that he discussed in detail in his another significant work, Culture and Imperialism. So what exactly is cultural imperialism? Cultural imperialism is when the dominant culture, generally the Western culture, when they try to impose their values, cultures, beliefs, worldviews on another culture through, let's say, media, education, literature, or any other means, making it seem like that this dominant culture is the ideal one, the standard one, or the default one. And here's the thing, that even after colonial powers pack up and leave, cultural colonization sticks around. It occurs with us in ways that often goes unnoticed. For example, Western education systems replacing the native knowledge. You have English language being privileged over the local ones. You also have beauty standards, aspirations, the body images being modeled on the West. Now, what does Edward Said have to say about all of this? He argues that even the English literary canon is not neutral. It is not unbiased. It is somewhere favoring cultural imperialism. Why? Because it reinforces the cultural stereotypes of the colonized people, representing them as exotic, savage, or even dangerous. Worse still, that their voices are silenced altogether, like Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. They are reduced to be mere background characters in their own national histories. Think of novels where colonized countries were just represented as backgrounds. For example, India, Egypt, Africa, they were reduced to mere backdrops for the Western characters to find themselves or experience adventure. So when we are talking about Edward Said and cultural imperialism, he has always believed that cultural imperialism is not about content, it's about control. Who gets to speak, who is spoken for, and who remains invisible. Having said that, now let's talk about some UGC-NET relevant texts wherein Orientalism shows up. The very first example that comes into my mind is Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. It is portraying Africa to be very dark, primitive, chaotic. The story isn't about real Africa at all. It is about how Europe imagines Africa to be. And understand one thing, guys, that Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness is a highly canonized literary text, which takes me back to Said's argument that even English literary canon is not unbiased. It is also not neutral. It is very much complicit with cultural imperialism. And one of the very first persons to destabilize it was Chinua Achebe, who has criticized Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness in a very honest and straightforward manner in his essay An Image of Africa. Then you have Rudyard Kipling's Skim, where India is sort of acting as a playground for the British intelligence, and Indian settings are basically romanticized and very much simplified and reduced. Then you also have E.M. Foster's A Passage to India, which deals with the Orientalist themes with a very sympathetic manner, but there is still some cultural stereotyping here and there. In contrast to all of these narratives, you have Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children. It is a post-colonial text that rewrites history from the Indian point of view. Not just that, it serves to be a counter-narrative to the Orientalist storytelling. So to sum up, whatever we have discussed up until now in this video, there are 3 key takeaways that you absolutely need to remember for UGC-NET. What are they? First, Orientalism is a discourse. It is a system of thought that produces knowledge about the East to justify Western domination. Second, side emphasizes the fact that how the East is constructed as the other, basically as the savage, the primitive, the irrational, or even the darker side of the West to define what West isn't. It's basically binary thinking, civilized versus savage, rational versus irrational, etc. And finally, understanding that literature is political. Anything from novels, poems, or academic texts, all of these things, they are not neutral. They participate in and sometimes challenge the prevalent power structures. So the next time when you watch a movie that exoticizes India or read a colonial era novel that treats East as an adventure zone, remember that it's not just fiction, it is an ideology. Edward Said's Orientalism helps us in decoding the politics behind representation. And also understand one thing, guys, that it's not just a literary theory or a literary concept. It is a tool that helps us in unlearning everything we were taught to see or to understand as normal. If this video finally helped you in understanding what is Orientalism and cultural imperialism, then you are free to hit that like button, share a comment with your favorite example, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more such English literature and UGC-NET insights. Until then, keep questioning what you read.